what we couldn't and didn't tell at that moment was we didn't want to do it. However, by doing it, we tried to create as much nuisance value as possible and to make the other ones think again. Last year brought us a breakthrough. In December, after a lot of discussions and a lot of other developments, we can go into that later, our two regulators, the Market Authority and the Telecom Authority, in a way elevated the Amsterdam open fiber philosophy to be the national policy. So they agreed to KPN and the partners to cooperate in rolling out fiber in the Netherlands, provided that they voluntarily would open up the fiber network and make it stay open. And of course, that made it possible for Amsterdam to enter into an agreement with this KPN Rega fiber combination and say, okay, if you're going to do it, if you're going to roll out open fiber, then you better do it in Amsterdam as well. So last February we signed an agreement in Amsterdam, and well, the rollout we hope will start around this summer. First to the next 100,000 subscribers in Amsterdam, and of course copper subscribers will be transferred to fiber. And then we hope the rest of the city. So we had some marvelous developments in the last few months. I hope I can show you a little movie where the first incumbent in Europe is going to tell that yes, we need fiber, but I don't know if it's going to work. But put it ready. Judy, could you help? Judy, could you help me, please, otherwise? Because this is the first time I believe VLC is going to play on this computer. Sound?
House sound?
Sound?
They were testing the sound earlier. There's no sound coming out of it. It's all it's that newfangled technology.
It's flash. I think that it's brought to us from America, but well, anyway.
Josh, Joe?
You know, Dirk, if you pull out the audio jack and just put the microphone down there by the speakers, that
Okay, then we start again.
That can work.
Let's start again. Again.
May not work.
I think it's a very clever idea.
Watch hundreds of movies instantly. Enjoy a super realistic cinema experience in the best quality possible. Study from home.
Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. How are you today?
Call as often and for as long as you like. Experience gaming at the speed of light together with a friend on the other side of the world. Up and download files within seconds. Our possibilities really are endless. Experience it yourself. Visit your local KPN Fiber Optics Information Center. KPN Fiber Optics. Ready for the next decade.
Well, of course, I'm a civil servant working for the city of Amsterdam. I don't have any shares of KPN, nor I'm going to buy them. And I don't want to make an advertisement for KPN, but I just wanted to show you this movie because it's very interesting that this company, where I believe still 40% of the people believe that copper can be milked for a long time coming, but is making this move. And you see that the board of this organization understands, hey, fiber is going to be the final network that will be there. It doesn't matter that much whether the services will only be ours, as long as the network is used and we are involved in that, we will make money. I think they very cleverly analyzed what we're going to see. So we are very happy in Amsterdam to cooperate. They have much more marketing power than we as a city ever could have. And of course the result will be that Amsterdam gets the network, the open network that we want. So, over to you.
Thanks, Dirk. Thanks again to Joanne and to David for a kind invitation to join you. My name is Lev Garnick. I want to tell you a short story to begin, and I'll just roll back the clock 5 years, where 5 years ago, Case Western Reserve University and the City of Cleveland formed a partnership to create an open fiber optic network based on a community network model. We were the first two organizations in what would become what we think is a pretty interesting model. So we fast forward now 5 years to the present. We actually have, from what used to be 2 institutional partners, we now have 1 million end users in Northeast Ohio, institutional users, across 22 counties, connecting some 1,800 facilities and organizations, including 800 schools, the 23 universities, something on the order of about 15 governments at local, regional, all of the healthcare facilities, 75 healthcare facilities, public county libraries as well as city libraries, and museums all connected to this community network infrastructure. Now let me just tell you a story about a little bit about the difference between the models that we'll be hearing about today and tomorrow. We certainly are well aware of the model of essentially the incumbent telecommunications providers with respect to the rollout of broadband as one model for services. And we're hearing some amazing stories, and I've been able to follow their stories and work that Bill and others have been doing with amazing municipal efforts to roll out broadband services. And the model that we think we represent is a kind of third way. It's a bit of a hybrid model, if you will, which is actually a community network. We have actually formed a 501c3 called One Community. It is the platform enabler of this open network, which has today something on the order of about 4,000 route miles of infrastructure across the 22 counties, including a lot of layered. In other words, there's not 4,000 miles, obviously, from end to end, but when you look at all the premises that are actually connected. And has a model of governance which really is, as I like to say, mayor or governor proof, because the community actually owns the infrastructure and the governance. And the only other piece I'd share in these opening remarks is that as a university leader in this effort, the goal was not to build up fiber optics. The goal was actually to help connect, enable, and then transform our community in Northeast Ohio, focusing in on education and healthcare. And those are the drivers for all of this engagement activity that we've been working on. It spans pretty much pre-K through 20. All the museums and libraries are involved in a significant amount of informal education work that extends well into lifelong learning environments. All of the healthcare partners, the Cleveland Clinic, the university hospitals, Metro Health, and the Veterans Administration, all involved in direct healthcare education, directly into schools, as well as into senior citizens facilities, and just about everything in between. The last thing I'll just say is that layered on top of that significant infrastructure that connects Youngstown, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, and everything in between are a series of healthcare spurs to rural community healthcare, just to kind of pick up on Tim's point here, as a way to begin to connect a significant part of rural Northeast Ohio. And finally, there are some 5,000 wireless access points forming both a series of mesh as well as hotspots that are pretty much focused around the population density areas in Northeast Ohio. So that's the short version of our story for right now, and we'll come back to it during Q&A. Bill?
Thank you, Lev. Thank you, Joanne, for chairing this panel, ringleading this panel, so to speak, and thank you, David, for the invitation. In terms of shameless promotion, I will have to put Starbucks up here because my office is 3 miles from the headquarters of Starbucks and about 10 miles from the imperial headquarters of the Microsoft empire. Seattle, as you know, is the headquarters not only of the coffee culture but also of tech culture, at least for the Northwest. So where is Seattle and what is it that we're actually doing? And the answer to that latter question, unfortunately, is still not much in terms of actually fiber to the premise or directly engaging residents. We started in 2004, 2005. I actually had a city council member who was quite inspired by the citywide municipal free wireless Wi-Fi that Philadelphia was doing. And of course, anybody who looked at that, even in those days, knew that that was not a sustainable business model. There's no reason that would actually work. But that is what originally inspired that city council member to create a commission, a citizens commission or community commission, to actually look at what networks would be. He expected the commission would come back and say, gee, you ought to build a municipal Wi-Fi network to cover the city of Seattle. What they actually did in 2005 is came back and said, you ought to build a fiber network, a fiber to the premise network, to connect all the residents and businesses of Seattle. The reason they did that, and this is kind of a specific reason to Seattle, is that our incumbents are Qwest for telecommunications as the telco, and Comcast for the as the cable company. Qwest does not have the financial capability really to compete with Comcast in terms of internet. What that means for Seattle is that we would be, despite being a high-tech center, one of the very last cities to get high-speed broadband, because Comcast is clearly going to put its dollars elsewhere where it actually has to compete with a Verizon Fios. And Verizon Fios is actually coming to the suburbs of Seattle. I don't know that we're actually seeing any movement of people or businesses to those suburbs, but certainly if you consider the Microsoft community with 40,000 jobs or the startup community in Seattle, there's a lot of employees of those companies who need and want that high-speed networking, not to say the regular residents. So anyway, that was the commission report in 2005 that launched us on this odyssey. And since then, we've been doing a considerable amount of work trying to determine what the business model might be for a fiber to the premises network in Seattle, whether it's the retail model that Tim described or an institutional model that Lev described or a more wholesale model. And I have to agree with what Tim was saying that this is not really hard to do except for the fact that you have incumbents with embedded networks that they want to squeeze that last dollar of cash out of. For Seattle, this would be a $500 million proposition, $500 million, which sounds like a lot of money, unless you compare it to a sports stadium. We build a sports stadium, and I love going to Safeco Field to see the Mariners for $500 million, but it serves those 40,000 people that actually crowd into the stadium for every game. Or you compare it to a highway project, like we have a viaduct along the waterfront that's going to be replaced for $4 billion, 8 times the cost of connecting fiber to every home and business in Seattle. And as Joanne mentioned, she's actually helping us develop a business model for that. My mayor's on board. I appreciate your comment about being mayor or governor-proof. With mayors or governors, as with incumbents, I have to remember that this is being broadcast. My mayor is Greg Nichols. He's going to be president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors next year. And he is phenomenally on board. We had a cabinet retreat in January. All the city government department heads and policy folks. I can't even remember what subject we were discussing, but all of a sudden he gets up and talks for 70 seconds. Now, 70 seconds is a long time in a cabinet retreat about this, about fiber to the premise, what it means for the people of Seattle, what it means for economic development. My mayor's on board. So one way to mayor-proof is to co-opt your mayor or convince him to do the work. Another way with the incumbents is perhaps to co-opt them. I've had no success with that yet. You obviously have, Dirk. So our present situation is we do have an electric utility, Seattle City Light, 9th largest municipal electric utility in the United States. We own or co-own 100,000 poles. We've had a fiber partnership since 1996 that includes the federal GSA, University of Washington, community colleges, Seattle schools, as well as city government and county government departments. We've deployed 300 route miles of fiber connecting virtually every major public facility within the city limits, probably over 30,000 fiber strands, including elementary schools. My electric utility, again, I'm going to have to watch this live streaming. We've kind of dragged them kicking and screaming. The mayor's dragged them kicking and screaming into seeing that this has got possibilities for smart grid. And we're hoping, again, with stimulus funding, to give this a bit of a jump start in terms of making that backbone more robust and actually building out an underserved area. And so that's Seattle's story.
Thank you. So as I am watching the group chat here, I'm having a different experience than I usually have at conferences, where I find the question is always Muni versus not Muni, but that doesn't seem to be the driving controversy on what was the screen behind us. I can see it here. I don't know if you're all watching this, but the group chat is over fiber versus wireless. And that's actually a really interesting question, because I think we're all true believers up here. So why don't we dig right into that, since I think there are a number of people in the audience who are not yet convinced, or who want to think about where we look at these two technologies and how we look at them, and what the relationship between the two is, and what the relationship between the two is perhaps in different kinds of geographic areas. Urban, suburban, rural, urban, again, urban and rural. How do we think about these two technologies? How do they come together? What's the vision of your community? And what is your feel in your community for what the needs are? What are the drivers that you're trying to address with your project? And how would fiber or wireless meet those particular driving needs? Shall we go backwards this time? Or does anybody want to volunteer? And I'll walk around and move this around. Okay, why don't we start with Dirk and then pass it along.
Well, privately, I at home have a fiber connection, which I pay for privately. We're quite Protestants in Amsterdam. And so I tested all the day, and it's about 33 megabits, symmetric. We also have very high quality HSDPA networks in Amsterdam. I used it, and that's what my boss pays for me, because it's quite expensive. Well, the speed on this thing, where is it? It's very nice. It works in the metro, it works in the tram, and it's extremely slow. So, yes, it's very good to have it. Do you want more wireless in Amsterdam? Yes. What do you need for wireless? You need a lot of access points. What do those access points need? They need backhaul. How are you going to get backhaul from T1? No, I don't think so. I think they need fiber. I think it was last Friday, the news was that in Europe, suddenly Telefonica and Vodafone, big enemies, decided to cooperate and to use each other's networks, because otherwise they couldn't do it. So in a way, it was kind of communism in bringing together commercial assets and using it together. They need fiber, they need backhaul. So in Amsterdam, we think that by deploying a fine-maced open fiber grid, you will also create the circumstance for an extra wireless network. Still, it will be very slow compared with a real connection at home. So I think they will be next to each other.
So I've shared sort of, Joanne, the kind of way that we've approached, these are not oppositional issues. I know for a long time, as you were saying earlier on, Bill, that there was an effort to kind of go either or, sort of in the sort of standard one-node dichotomy. And the truth is, from an infrastructure build-out, these are very much part of a portfolio. As anybody who was involved in the Muni wireless space, and I suspect 85% of the people here, and it sounds by the chat online, 100% of the people online, there was a lot of euphoria around the idea that somehow there was a chance to somehow do a leapfrogging exercise. But in the end, as it were, the way to view this really is around layered services, fiber being at the base of that layering exercise. And there are two different approaches to wireless. One is for public access, and there's a lot of that in Northeast Ohio as a result of the One Community rollout of services. That is to say, on top of the institutional partner's commitment to be fiber optically a subscriber to One Community, many, but not all, of the institutional subscribers enable wireless services within, if you will, their footprint. So it's not only universities and museums and libraries and government facilities. There are something on average any given day of the week by midday, something like 5,000 simultaneous wireless users of the One Community guest network infrastructure. So the other piece of it, in addition to public wireless access, is all the infrastructure opportunities that we have for using wireless for backhaul, which we do in all kinds of places, especially for long haul requirements, lots of beam, as it were, gigabeam kinds of infrastructure. And of course, when we think about wireless, it's not only Wi-Fi, there is a range of wireless technologies, and all of them, in terms of an integrated, community-focused solution set, can be both incredibly pragmatic as well as flexible if they're part of the portfolio, rather than, as it were, essentially either ideologically we're committed to this or to that, or through some kind of a kind of twinning of technology vendors saying, we'll only work with this party on the fiber and this party on the wireless side of the house. So I think, again, when communities take ownership of their own future related to the rollout of these services, and they're connected to programmatic delivery, in our case, healthcare and education, when you're talking about how to deliver healthcare services to people in inner city Cleveland whose access to broadband is equivalent to the kind of thing that Tim described in rural Vermont, that is to say, it doesn't exist. Wi-Fi is part of the solution, and over time, as we roll out our fiber to the premise effort in this next period of time, we hope to be able to enrich, as Dirk was saying, kind of enrich the experience, because, of course, you can do programmatic delivery with fiber on a quality of service related to healthcare and education that is certainly not going to be anything like the experience they have today with Wi-Fi.
Can we get the chat back up on the screen? Because it is kind of fascinating, some of the questions.
It's also there for you.
It's there, but I think for the audience, working on that, great. So
That's why I said bring a laptop. The redundancy is something else.
So the question here is wired or fibered, actually, versus wireless. So what's the killer app? Now, a few of you from the looks of the audience are probably old enough to remember the first killer app, which is probably VisiCalc, right? And there's been some other killer apps for networking. Email has certainly been a killer app. The web itself you consider to be a killer app. Maybe YouTube, maybe Facebook or Twitter these days, although it's still too soon to tell. What's the killer app for a network? And people, I submit to you it's HDTV. Virtually every home and business is going to have an HDTV screen. You slap an HD camera up on that screen, and if you've got symmetric two-speed networking, all of a sudden you have got a video teleconference network. Think of the implications of HDTVs in homes on telecommuting, climate control, reducing commute trips, education, grandchildren. That's what I love is my dad could actually have dinner, he lives in Iowa, I live in Seattle, dinner with his grandchild in Seattle every night via HDTV, and we could see each other and watch the beads of sweat form on my brow. Quality of life, education, healthcare, but it's only possible with a fiber network. It's not possible, not for the foreseeable future at least, because of the symmetric needs. It's not possible with a wireless.
Tim, as you address also, I think, the fiber versus wireless, we're starting to see some discussion here of models for funding and business models, and I know this is an issue dear to your heart. So maybe you can talk about making a future-proof investment and what the financial analysis on payback is as part of your fiber versus wireless discussion, because that, I think...
We see about maybe getting a couple mics up here so that we're not quite...
Okay.
You should be more impromptu.
So in addition to addressing the application side of things and the functionality, maybe talk about the financial side of fiber wireless and how they relate to each other.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. I'll narrow down very focused. I love wireless. When I was building rural telephone companies in Eastern Europe, and I got to tell you, Southeast Poland looks a whole lot topographically like Vermont. Used wireless local loop a lot, and it was fine for that, for those purposes, because we were only trying to get an 8 kilohertz analog POTS line, and wireless was fine. Wireless local loop was pretty good for that. We also had no ambitions of being universal. But in the world we live, in the world I live now, an 8 megahertz or 8 kilohertz POTS line is not even close to acceptable, and universality is fundamental. We have a community network. I did the mayor thing. That was Burlington. That was fine. We had a great mayor. But EC Fiber is a bona fide community network. I mean, community movement, mass movement by people who are afraid their communities are going to disappear without this. Getting on to the numbers, absolutely no ideological axe to grind whatsoever. The simple fact is that fiber is cheaper and more economic. Now you say, oh, good, surely that can't be. Well, it is if you intend to be universal. And I'll give you some numbers. In our territory, the CapEx to provide a fiber into every single house and connect and have up and running 65% of the people is $69 million. Okay? We've looked very hard at wireless because I said I'm a businessman. It's all about money for me. Money and service. And I'm a non-profit businessman, but I'm a Vermonter, and nobody gets the right of Tim Nolte when it comes to financial responsibility. Nobody. And that's not Republicans, not Democrats, not nobody, not communists. Certainly not communists. And but the cost, well, the best wireless operator, and incidentally, we absolutely intend to put a wireless cloud on top of our fiber. And we've been looking very, very closely. Best RF people in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine are my close friends, and we work very closely on this. The best thing we can see right now is either the 2.3, 2.5 gigahertz WiMAX. Unfortunately, both of those bandwidths are owned by people who hoard them, so it's very hard to get hold of them. There's also a 3.65 out now, and you can actually buy the equipment. To get even close on our 1,000 square miles, to get even close to universality, and you can't get actual universality with radio at all, but you can get close. 90-95% of the people could get it. That's about $35 million. Now, I ask you, everybody in this room is enough of a businessman to know that if technology A costs half as much as technology B, but generates 1/4 of the revenue, which is more economic? That's real simple arithmetic. In fact, the $35 million for the Wi-Fi would generate about 1/4 to 1/3 of the revenue, but the actual technology, the capability, is 1% of the fiber. 1% of the fiber we put in today. Never mind what we can easily retrofit 5 years from now. What is it? A 2.5 or 3.65 gig would cost, say, about $35 million. It generates roughly 6 to 8 megs of throughput, which is shared among all the people. So you all know about DSL and cable modem. Works great at 3 o'clock in the morning, but at 8 o'clock it's lousy. Well, it's the same thing with WiMAX. Same problem. So, yeah, theoretically, if nobody else is on, you could get 6 megs. But if 25 other people and somebody, some kid is downloading and peering with his games and so forth, you'll be back down to 256. Now, so as a business proposition, that sucks. I'm sorry. It doesn't pay. On the other hand, that same WiMAX network placed on top of our fiber costs about, and with the head end already in place, the billing system's already in place, the customer service already in place, infinite backhaul already in place, is about $10 million. Now, a $10 million add-on to a $70 million investment, which adds $30 to my ARPU, is a great business. But it's only a great business because you built the fiber first. If you build the wireless first, it's a lousy business. And you're going to lose money until you finally get around to building the fiber. Well, why not build the fiber first? Now, that's plain economics from a businessman who's been making money and doing this stuff for 30 years?
So obviously many of us in the room are convinced, and I'm hoping that we have some representation, both in the room and perhaps online, from the FCC and MTIA, because these are some of the things that have not been discussed in a meaningful way in Washington for a decade, and that need to be really well aired in this time period, in particular as they decide what they're going to fund and how they're going to fund it, and what the criteria will be. And I'm going to invite our other speakers to also speak to this investment and financial side of things. And at the same time, given that we, if I'm reading that right, we have about half an hour left, those of you who are interested in asking questions, if you can signal me. Do we have microphones out in the audience?
Unfortunately, we don't have microphones, but if you have questions, line up here.
Thank you.
I'll use my unfair moderator's prerogative to figure out who gets to speak.
We don't need three.
We don't need all of us.
David, why don't you take one of these microphones, and we'll share two here.
Okay.
Great. So if you'll just line up there, and while the questioners are lining up, let me invite any of you to also comment on what Tim said or add your own perspective in, as far as the investment and the financial side of how you think about fiber, how you think about wireless, how they relate to each other. Anybody want to comment?
I think we all had a run at it.
I don't have anything else to add. Again, the institutional model's not driven quite. I mean, I think it's fair to say that in our environment, although there are institutional investors, I think one of the pieces of secret sauce that we have in the one community model is that governance, which is actually owned by the community, is actually led by entrepreneurs. So perhaps, younger versions of Tim, who are using the same kind of. Well, one's 38 and the other's 41, so maybe 2 or 3 years over you, but I'm not sure. But the point in all that is that there is, in fact, a need to keep the pencil sharp, and that this can't be, as it were, kind of a nonprofit process-oriented only approach. And return on community value gets married with a more traditional return on investment model, and that's what creates the real value proposition, which I think is replicable and scalable. And again, there are lots of interested parties. There's some representation today in the audience from folks from the Knight Center for Digital Excellence, which is an investment by the Knight Foundation, working with one community to help other communities leverage some parts of our model in their own communities as well. So a sense that those are some of the elements in the equation.
And I know there's a lot of questions, but I do think there's got to be some model for a public-private partnership where you actually get private investors to come in and do the last mile or offer the services. And the reason is that is the best way to co-opt those who would oppose these municipal deployments, the incumbents. And co-opting or partnering with an incumbent is a great idea if we could get one to do it.
Can I just before we go, David, can I just say that is a very important piece of the one community model, lest it not be clear that it's a very lightweight organization, virtually a virtual organization, and the actual fulfillment, not unlike nothing like the national scale that Dirk referred to, but certainly in the spirit, Bill, of what you just said, one community very much depends on the white trucks of the incumbents to actually do a lot of the non-consumer. Obviously, we're not in the consumer space, but in the commercial rollout of last mile fiber requirements.
Yeah, the model that was just described, I understand very well. I'm very sympathetic to it, and it's relatively. It is certainly possible to do it, as you said, with a relatively light institution and relatively inexpensively. And that's why there are a number of these, and why they're successful, both private and public. The really hard part about bringing is the last mile to everybody. It's an order of magnitude different level of undertaking. And the public-private, again, I'm talking as a practical businessman here, the single most advantageous aspect of municipality, of muni projects or community-based projects is their ability to be entirely financed with municipal debt. Now, I used to be a venture capitalist. Venture capital normally A startup starts with equity, the most expensive form of capital, by far. Then when you've got the thing up and going a little while, you talk somebody into funding 20% of your opportunity with high-yield junk bonds. And then gradually you move up the scale, and after you've been successful in your business and you have a 5-year track record, and so on and so forth, you just might be able, after 6, 7, 8, 9 years, to sell gilt-edged unsecured corporate bonds. That's the way things usually go. That's the hard work of ordinary startup. What municipalities permit is to turn that upside down and finance a project entirely from the very beginning with what amounts to gilt-edged corporate bonds. You're doing it with municipal debt. Now, in Vermont, it so happens that it's illegal, unfortunately, to finance telecommunications with general obligation bonds backed by the taxpayer. So we have to use some variety of revenue bonds, which means we pay a higher rate, and it's harder to sell them, particularly nowadays. But you're still building your project. Very expensive, universal, fiber to the home, final stuff, the real down-in-the-dirt hard job with pure debt. Now, the minute you introduce, and I am absolutely not against private enterprise at all. I'm financially independent as a former venture capitalist. How could I possibly be against private enterprise? Nevertheless, the minute you bring private enterprise in any way, and I have tried really hard to figure out how to do this, into a municipal environment, you lose the single biggest advantage the municipal has, which is the ability to finance with tax-exempt debt. The minute you bring equity in any form, you lose the tax exemption. Now, in the EC Fiber case, it is in fact a community network. The 22 towns have come together as a group. They know full well they don't have the capacity to build this thing. So they will take the money, they will borrow the money, and they will control the money. They will own the network, and they will control. All the money comes to a central bank account controlled by the towns. But they have contracted with a nonprofit telecom operation, experienced telecom operation in the region, to be the builder and operator of thing under contract, with an understanding that after 5, 6, 7, 8, however many years, if the towns become comfortable, because, collections of towns in Vermont have done other complicated things like solid waste operations and public transport and wide area water works and so forth. If they become comfortable, yeah, we understand that, we can take it over, then they will do so. And the nonprofit says, fine, no problem, it's in the contract, they can take it over. But it starts out with a nonprofit doing all the hard work. The nonprofit considered becoming profitable, a profit operation, so that it could raise some equity to assist with this thing. Not to make a lot of money, but just so that we could access the quite large amount of high-yield, of high-income individuals in Vermont who'd be willing to put in money on an equity basis, even a modest equity basis. 10%, 15% of $100 million. This is a $100 million project. 69 is the capex, but you have cost of borrowing and so forth. So 10 million of a $100 million project in equity would be a very nice addition to the capital structure. We can't do it. We have not been able to figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't destroy the financial underpinnings of the thing, which is the municipal debt market. Lehman Brothers destroyed the municipal debt market, but we haven't been able. Hopefully, we'll climb out of that hole. So that's. Yeah.
I think we have
I'd just like to add one little problem to the equation, and that illustrates, I think, why it's so important that cities are involved, at least during the rollout. If you are rolling out in a rural surrounding, I believe environmental houses are sorted horizontally, right? If they're built next to each other, they're horizontally next to each other. In places like Amsterdam or Paris, houses are stacked vertically. If you want to connect the top floor, you need access to all the homes in the stack. That's a big problem we find in Amsterdam. And you need a lot of social technique to influence people to open the doors and to allow the installment of fiber. So there's fiber. The problem can be to bring fiber to the home. How to get it into the homes is another problem that you also have to solve.
Thank you. And I think we are about to get a number of very interesting and provocative questions and comments.
Yes, as moderator, I reserve the right to be a complete arbitrary bastard, in the interests of making a good meeting, of course.
I'm glad it's been doing that, not me.
So I beg Jerry's and Bob's forgiveness. I am going to call first on Mark Cooper, where we've actually done some behind-the-scenes conspiring. So, Mark, pray tell, what is on your mind? This works
This
fine.
works now, fine. It's working, well, yeah. David asked me to be provocative, an invitation I could never refuse. And the question is, which comes first, wireless or fixed or mobile computing? And the answer, the interesting thing is that we were given an answer which is driven by the killer app, which is HDTV. No, for the current project of connecting and serving the unserved and underserved, the killer app is connectivity. That is what they need. And talking to them about HDTV, two-way symmetric, misses the social problem, we believe. And so we've been advocating a combination of middle mile fiber, and so we understand that you've got to get fiber out there, particularly to all the institutions in the community, but first mile cutting edge wireless, which isn't quite as bad as the little device that was flashed around. And we think there are 4 reasons why you want to do this for the current project with $7.2 billion of funds. 4 reasons. 1, it does enable you to get farther. Tim's numbers say twice as far. He's got half the cost. Most other people come up with 4 times as far. So you get an awful lot farther with a mobile first mile. Second, the mobile computing with cutting-edge technology is actually a twofer for the unserved and underserved. That is, I get 2 things. I get mobile computing, and I also get basic connectivity that actually meets most of the needs, or in fact, all of the needs that those households have to get connected to broadband space. So it really is a twofer. If you throw in government services, there may be some government services that will need that HD, but there's just an awful lot of plain old connectivity, browsing, etc., that's needed. Third, middle mile and mobile computing are in fact future-proof. That is, they are part of and will be part of the 21st century communications ecology as long as the eye can see. Mobile computing is actually a substantially different service and will in fact be used and useful for the rest of the century, and also upgradable as we move through different technologies. And finally, if you are going to argue for a massive public subsidy, to call this a public good, we would like to see public accountability imposed. Now, everybody on that panel actually has an institutional basis which is, in fact, beholden to the public. So you're the good guys. Unfortunately, 80 or 90% of America ain't served by good guys, right? They are served by for-profit entities, and we don't have good public interest regulation to control how they're going to spend that money. I can't get a commitment on price from them. I work with the rural co-ops in rural America to try and get a price commitment. We've engaged the public housing authorities to be another possible place, a vehicle for urban America. So our conclusion here is, with this sum of money for this problem, which is basic connectivity, the middle mile mobile computing is the better alternative, serves more people, and ought to be supported by everybody in this room and online. Thank you.
1 minute, Mark. Point of clarification. You used the editorial "we" several times. Do you mean you, or are you representing a consensus of a group?
Well, the we, and we filed comments at the FCC. You can get them in the proceeding. We, for the moment, is the Consumer Federation and the Consumers Union. The Consumer Federation just happens to have as its founding members both municipal co-ops and rural municipal utilities and rural electric co-ops. They are very interested in actually building these systems. I expect them to put in a lot of project proposals at the NTA RUS. So there's a certain set of people who are both pursuing it at the policy level, but also will be pursuing it at the ground level to actually get that $7.2 billion to serve the most people we can.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. First, your very last point about public accountability, I endorse 100%. You're right, all the people up here are good guys. Most of the people you deal with are not. Your comment about you can't get a price, I think that should warn you a little bit about what you're hearing, because I'll give you a price. I know exactly what it costs, and I will give you the price. And I know the price that I can charge in order to get my money back on wireless is double what I have to charge on the fiber. This is true.
Plus, there's a ton of competition.
Now, wait a minute. If you were just giving money away, which unfortunately, remember, I'm a Vermonter. I'm a child of the Depression. That tells you how old I am. Nobody. I'm very liberal on social matters. I'm very liberal on civil rights and foreign policy and all that stuff. But when it comes to a dollar, I am not liberal at all. I am a stingy Vermont Yankee. And giving away public money, as is happening with the NTIA, is bad policy. Particularly when telecommunications can pay its own way. Rural fiber can pay its own way. It does not need giveaways. Rural wireless does need giveaways because it doesn't pay. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. So yeah, if you're just tossing taxpayer money out there and giving it away for people who don't care whether they make money back from it, fine, do wireless, do anything you damn please. It's rubbish. It doesn't pay. The fact is that a wireless operation, as I said, we've looked at this very carefully. In our 1,000 square miles, to get even close to universality. And remember, that's a key. The first 80% or 75% of coverage on wireless is real easy and real cheap. But if you're a community, sorry, we don't tell people 5 miles out that their kid can't go to school because you're too far away, we can't send the bus to you. We don't tell people we won't come to your house if it's burning down because, sorry, you're too far away. We don't do that in Vermont communities, and I don't believe they do that in any American rural communities.
So, Tim,
if you're a member of the community, you get the stuff. Now, 1,000 square miles, to cover that with 3.65 gig, which is the best stuff we can get out there that's not locked up right now, and that's another question, it requires at least 200 installations, at least 200, and possibly more. We have 1,600 miles of road. Those installations are $25,000 to $30,000 each. We have 1,600 miles of road to get to those things and provide the fiber backhaul, which you need, because if you do the backhaul with hopped wireless, you get jitter and latency that renders the whole thing unacceptable. We need 500 miles of fiber. 500 miles of fiber. We only need 1,400 miles to get to everybody. That's why it's $35 million. We still have to build a hub. We still have to build a back office. We still have to build customer service. We have to build all those things anyway.
So, Tim, let me just pick up on Herman's point that's flittering in front of us and say that, folks, if this is where the conversation is going to go, these are internal family debates that we're having here. And it's a really tragic situation. Absolutely, number one issue should be about connectivity. Absolutely, no one should be disputing it. But if we're going to have a return to a debate inside the family as to an either-or scenario, folks, we are missing, as Joanne framed it, the chance of a generation to really make a difference.
I didn't start the either-or debate.
No, connectivity.
We did not start the either-or debate.
No, so all I'm saying is let's remain pragmatic.
And so our or was not in the room until we put it in the room.
And we're happy that you did. I'm just suggesting that we remain pragmatic, and we ask the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And if it's education, if it's healthcare, or if it's access for the sake of access, that's good enough to begin to frame and design the technical solutions. But please, folks,
Connectivity is an empty phrase. Everybody in America has connectivity today. Everybody has dial-up. and almost everybody can get satellite. But what does connectivity mean? Think of motor transport. We'd say, how can you be a member of modern American society if you can't get a motorized transport to your house? But does motorized transport mean a motorcycle on a one dirt track? Or does it mean a 40-foot paved road, or near paved road, we don't have many paved roads in Vermont, that can be accessed by a garbage truck and an ambulance and a school bus?
Okay, well, we've done really admirably so far at allowing a lot of discussion. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions and 10 minutes to entertain them. So,
and just really quickly, if I started a debate between fiber and wireless, I apologize. They're symbiotic. We're all on the same page.
I started it. It was actually my doing. So
quick show of hands. How many for wireless and fiber are synergistic? How many are either or? Jerry.
Okay, I am now going to assert myself. Sorry, David?
Yeah.
60 seconds, 60-second responses. Okay, in the spirit of NTIA, they made that work. So forgive us because I know you've been waiting a long time, but we've got 10 minutes, 8 minutes, and that was my doing, and I apologize.
1, 2, 3, go. So I thank the panel for convincing many of us that fiber is the foundation on which you can support wireless. We're all here, I think, because we understand that. And after this panel is over, we're going to give you a great hand because all of you have done successful end runs around structural dislocations in the market that have delayed fiber in this country and elsewhere. I am here to make the remark that there are also structural dislocations which have delayed the revolution we await in wireless, and that is the cell phone industry, which gives us an architecture of the cell phone tower and all the dependent cell phones. But it's possible to have a wireless architecture which is mesh, in which each unit can route and pass on packets to others. And that then gives you a different kind of technology which might provide support business plans that use wireless as the vanguard of attack on new territory and new markets. So just as you have come to realize that you are not only working as technologists, but as politicians for social and technological change in fiber, so you have that task ahead of you in wireless. Thank you.
60-second responses, and we can see the clock right here.
Less than 60 seconds. In Burlington, we were extremely interested in mesh. Looked at it, had several mesh operations come up and pilot in Vermont, in Burlington, and we would love to use it, and will use it for certain circumstances in EC fiber. Problem with mesh, and this was not what the manufacturers say, but what you actually find when you do it, is that it's fine for thin uses, for thin bandwidth uses. It's great for police and fire and taxi dispatch and things like that. But for heavy usage, it doesn't work. You can't carry really large amounts of stuff. It breaks down. And that's the practical fact.
Thank you, Tim. Next question, please.
Okay.
Forgive me.
Hopefully, a medium-sized question with a very long answer that you can do. Since I've been accused of doing the killer app, the thing to observe is the important thing about VisiCalc was it did absolutely nothing and was not a service. It was just enabling technology. The problem is here is the funding model, not the particular technology. I don't care with fiberglass, and we're letting 20 years of Moore's Law of copper go by the wayside, but we haven't done it. The real problem is the funding model. As long as you have to justify services at high speed, you're basically going to be stuck with just, very high costs, limited services. You don't get
AFI silver at 8630.
Okay.
Keep going.
You can't do simple things that save lives, which don't take many bits. So the picture phone has failed. What we need is a change of dynamic. We're stuck in railroads now where you have to pay for each trip. If we model after railroads, but without all the physical encumbrance or something, we could just assume connectivity. There's essentially no cost to making the copper fast, and complement with wireless, and then you get coverage where you don't get fiber, you get wireless coverage. But more important, you get the ability to assume connectivity at any speed. Speed is trivially easy if you know what you do, why you want it. Right now, we're trying to go from no coverage to high speed, and that's where we're going to miss all the vital apps.
Responses from the panel? Anybody want to address that?
I think the basic thing is, and that's what we went for in Amsterdam, is yes, you want all that option value. And the one way to get it is to make sure that you get point-to-point fiber in all of your city, to make sure that everything is connected.
It's not, but I'm not arguing about the fiber. The question is the funding model. Can you respond?
Yes, of course. The funding model, you can have to cooperate with anybody that wants to cooperate with you, as long as you have your target is clear, what kind of a network you want, so that you have the option value in the future. So perhaps you will have to cooperate with parties that will not completely do what you want, as long as you get what you need.
Thank you, Dirk. Do we have more questions waiting?
More questions. Bice. Ladies and gentlemen, Bice Wilson, an architect from Meridian Design in New York, who's become quite a good friend over the last few months. He's working on a project called Designing the Invisible Public Way. Kind of cool, huh?
The invisible public way is the hidden infrastructure, the public way that we are dependent on.
Bryce, can
yes.
you use the microphone?
Sure. The invisible public way is the system that we're here talking about today. Unlike our roads and so many other kinds of rights of way, we don't assume as a culture that we can intervene in its design and its configuration, even though we are completely dependent on it for much of our lives these days. So one of the things that this process which we've initiated, and I'll give out the URL for the collaboration website we're working on this with, and David helped me start this, is to try and attack this cultural issue. So what I want to ask the panel is, how many of you have been involved with your local urban design culture, your economic development culture, in influencing where the nervous system goes first? One of the things that we've realized in our analysis is that there's a vast network of existing public sector, knowledge industry, creative economy, and human services institutions that really need this, that would force the web to go everywhere, as opposed to just to the neighborhoods where people can afford to buy a lot of movies.
So, Bill, in our case, that is the raison d'etre of the entire one community model, and it starts with that series of slices of our community that are both committed to a reimagining and a reinvention and a reinvigoration of a Rust Belt city from the heart and pulse of the creative community education and healthcare.
Cool.
And in Seattle, I could pull up a map right here of the underserved areas, the low-income areas, the disadvantaged areas, which I intend to direct our efforts toward.
Okay.
We have another question?
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present Roxanne Guggen, who is another extremely good friend, longtime friend, who's advises large cap companies about coming technological discontinuities. Roxanne.
Okay, yes, this is a question about technological discontinuities. I hope this is working. Our financial and social structures really wrap around the strengths and weaknesses of our existing technologies. We move from the priesthood of SONET to perhaps plug-and-play Ethernet. The financial and social structures around bandwidth will clearly change, and I'm just curious where we are in that continuum. You know, we're moving away from these expensive old, again, SONET infrastructures to something more like packet Ethernet. Are we there yet? Are we halfway there yet? Any opinion?
60 seconds.
Yeah, I think I come to this from a perspective you're all now beginning to get a sense of. To me, the really important investment is in the universal fiber, just like the important investment 100 years ago was in universal copper. We've added electronics onto the copper over the last 100 years that have increased its capacity for all sorts of things by many orders of magnitude. It's the same thing going forward. If you structure your fundamental investment, the really big investment, which is the universal fiber, properly, And over time, you change out the electronics. It's relatively simple. There are 16,000 differentiable colors in the spectrum, and with technology today, you can put 4 to 6 terabits on every single one. That means a single fiber can carry orders of magnitude more communications that are currently going on in the entire globe. A single fiber. So once you have that, and glass, incidentally, doesn't corrode like copper. I mean, look at a glass window. A million years from now, it'll still be there. That's the point. Is the fiber infrastructure, not the electronics on the end of it.
Anybody else want to respond?
I would love to get some closing remarks. I think that's a great idea.
Closing remarks.
Thank you. And I'm going to start with mine, if I may. Which is to say that I don't think anybody in this room, or not many people in this room, need to be convinced that in the world of communities and municipalities and counties, there are people who are doing extremely important work, doing it thoughtfully, doing it in an entrepreneurial way, and doing it very successfully. I think our panel demonstrates that they are representative of the many people out there doing it. But I think there are some people, perhaps in the room and certainly online, and unfortunately many of those who are not listening, who are utterly convinced that municipalities and counties, local governments cannot do this in any way, or cannot do it nearly as well as the private sector. I would say that the experience of these 4 gentlemen proves that in many cases, communities and local governments do it better than the private sector, and that is one of the most important lessons that maybe many of you don't need to be convinced of, but that the broader community does need to be convinced of, because there is this very problematic discussion being led by so-called think tanks that suggests that this is just going to be pure failure if there is municipal involvement. I would suggest that we're actually looking at quite the opposite, and I hope we'll see some very creative municipal networks. And having gone over 60 seconds myself, I'm not going to ask each of you to try to make it really quick, because I can see David is...
Let's try 30 seconds.
Oh, I can pass. You've heard enough from me already, so...
Yeah, okay, try, Sean. Tomorrow, Herbert Wachter will speak also about what happened in Amsterdam. He will go deeply into what really happened, how difficult it is to deploy. He also will go into what happens in the situation where you don't have the kind of rules you have in Europe or in America, in Bangladesh, and see what the people themselves do. I think it's a very interesting presentation tomorrow.
So I think it's all about how we frame the question, and I think we have to be sure to try to keep framing it as broadly as we can. This is about open access. This is about underserved communities. This is about creating a foundation for a next generation of young people who can enter into the workforce with an education that prepares them for not only being competitive locally but globally. And I think it's also ultimately about trying to provide the enabling platform for reinventing a series of dysfunctionalities, including our healthcare delivery system and our education system. Those are positioning strategies for a globally competitive community or series of communities, and when aggregated, is a foundation for a strategy for the country.
And I will just inject a note of politics into this, because municipal bonds require typically require an election to approve the bonds, or working with the stimulus package requires leveraging the clout and the equity of private carriers and private telecommunications folks who also have political clout as well. And we just have to be cognizant of that as we work forward. But I guess I'll leave this on a more positive note, which is a challenge that we should build a network that lasts the rest of the 21st century to improve the quality of life and economic opportunity for all the people of America.
Thank you, Al.
So I think any one of us would be hard-pressed to find 5 more exceptional intellects that have applied themselves to this problem. So let's give the panel a real big round of applause. And now, as we know, the oldest and perhaps the most advanced form of communications technology that humanity has is music. John Jorgensen and the John Jorgensen Quintet. Take it away.